Welcome to The Finder of Lost Things, exploring your superpowers of trust, healing and transformation with me, Hannah Belton. My brother, Christian, disappeared in Mali, Africa in 2003. He disappeared without a trace. We lost his story, we didn't have closure, we lost so much. I was fighting and searching to find Christian when actually I just needed to sit in stillness and attract him in. I was so resistant to doing this, but I had to surrender. It's a process of trusting and finding the lost pieces and integrating them. This podcast will uncover the process that Christian and I went on to find the lost things, him, and to find the parts of me that were missing.
And we were destined from the start to tell our story into the dark, for we were born to a great white shark.
Hello everybody. Hi, welcome. Come on in as usual. Come and sit around in the circle. Lovely to have you here. This is actually my birthday week. So I'm 47 now, which seems ridiculously old. And yeah, it was funny. Christian would have been 46 this year. And yeah, it's kind of just the ages. It's a big sudden leap, I suppose, in terms of how much time has passed since I last saw him. And we celebrated his 40th birthday nearly 6 years ago now, and that seems ridiculous. But anyway, so Christian and I, we sat down this afternoon actually. We've got this new project that we're working on with a collaborator who I am not sure if you'll meet them on the podcast, but you will know of them in time. And I just sat down today in my shed, which is it's in the garden, but it's my fair weather office. So I come out of where I am now and go out into nature and spend the whole of the summer and early autumn just being outside, listening to the birds, listening to the fountain and getting my inspiration. So today we started to write. You will find out eventually what we're doing, but I just want to read you what I wrote with him today. So when Christian and I write together, I just hear his voice in my head and I just write down what he's saying. I don't know if it was Christian. I don't think it's Christian. It's Christian is sending me the messages. So he's downloading it from Spirit and sort of translating it to me, sort of adjusting the frequency, I guess, so that I can download it and it's sort of safe and it's easy for me to do. So I'm just going to read this. Every podcast episode I've done so far has resonated with certain people and they've been in touch with me. So I think this is quite a general message. So I think it will probably resonate with quite a few people. And then I'm going to introduce you to my lovely guest, Desi. So just bear with me. I'll just read this short piece. When the winds of chaos and change swirl around you, I will be there. When the world seems dark and cold, know that I am by your side, holding your hand, unseen. Never doubt our love can conquer all that life appears to throw your way. Know that you are strong beyond belief, and know that our love continues, remaining strong whatever the winds of change blow towards you. Keep opening your heart to me and to life. Death and love is not the end, just a transition, a call to transform. There is no need to heed others' advice, for you have all you need within. Listen to your heart, my lovely. Listen to your soul. Where is it calling you? So I just want to introduce you now to my lovely guest, Desi Kadra. Desi, I've known for a few years, and we got in touch over, I think it was over Twitter after I'd tweeted something about grief and loss. This was quite a few years ago. So and anyway, Desi got in touch with me and asked me to come on her YouTube channel. So her YouTube channel is called Bridging the Realm, and it's a YouTube and also a podcast channel. And really, Desi was the first one who I publicly told our story to, and I was very nervous about it. I'm going to bring Desi on now, actually. You'll see how beautiful she is and how calm and radiant she is. She's in the Barcelona sunshine in Spain at the moment, so she's looking beautifully glowing. So hi Desi, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi Hannah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, it feels like a bit of a role reversal because you've interviewed me twice actually, haven't you? And yeah, I was sort of saying you were the first one that we told our story to, and yeah, the first time I was on the screen with you, I was extremely nervous and not sure about what sort of reaction what I was going to get. Talking about this spiritual stuff and talking to Christian, and I was thinking, oh, they're all going to think I'm mad, but you didn't. And
no, no, definitely not. Yeah, and no, I think the story you told, it was amazing, and I mean, from what I remember, you came across really amazing, and the story was also so touching, and we had quite a few of the listeners who also commented later on that it was a really fascinating story and really courageous of you to actually tell it, and in such a way that's never really been told before by anyone. So yeah, it's really incredible what you're doing. So I'm really glad that I got in touch in the end and we managed to to connect.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, it's funny. Several people have actually said to me that they've never heard anything quite like our story. So I'm thinking that's a good thing. It's bad in a way because, well, not bad, but it's difficult in a way that there aren't other people talking about this, so which makes it sort of normal. But hey, Christian and we're pioneers. That's fine. We're just crash on as we are doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so role reversal. I'm going to be asking you the questions this time, Desi. So I know, can you sort of tell me a bit about how, because obviously our story touched you, that grief and loss. Can you just tell me a bit about, and the audience a bit about your loss and your grief?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, as I mentioned previously, with obviously with your story, it was so touching, and I think that sort of need to want to connect to your loved one that you haven't been able to connect with them in the physical reality really resonated with me. Even though my story is very different to yours, it's still that kind of search for that person and wanting to connect with them, even though they might be they're in spirit. Is still so strong, and I think many people who experience loss feel this way, but they're I guess because of the stigma that goes with everything to do with the spirituality in the spiritual world and what happens in life after death, a lot of people actually don't want to talk about it, they don't want to confront it, and I think my story similarly with you wanting to talk about it is kind of that's what kind of happened with me. So yeah, to get to it, basically around 7 years ago, around 9 years ago, my mom had cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer, and after she went along with the whole treatment, she did the chemo, the radio. She even had surgery to remove, it was colon cancer initially. And then we got the all clear, everything was fine. And then 3 months later, it came back, and this time it was in her liver, and it kind of spread, and basically within 3 months she passed away. So it was kind of a very quick reversal of everything that we thought was happening. So obviously my whole family, me, my sister and my dad were in a huge shock because we really didn't expect for things to pan out that way. We got the all clear, so we thought everything was fine. And I guess to put it in a short way, my world pretty much crashed at that point. Everything that I believed in, everything that I thought was real, kind of just didn't make any sense anymore. So it was just I just started asking a lot of questions at that point, and it was kind of like, what's the point of this? What's the point of life? Why are we here? Pretty much all the regular questions that most people go through when they go through loss. So at this point, I wasn't religious, I wasn't spiritual. I guess I was atheist, if I was to put it in a simple way. I didn't really believe in anything, especially because my mom came from a Muslim background and my dad came from a Greek sort of Orthodox background. So obviously the two together kind of it didn't clash, but it's just like we weren't that religious, you know. So us, religion didn't really matter that much. We did class ourselves as Christian, but we did go to church, but not regularly. So it was kind of like every once a year or twice a year for special events. So yeah, I didn't really believe in anything to do with life after death, in thinking about the soul outside of the body. I guess I never really questioned myself before that, what really happens. And obviously after my mom passed away, I started to ask myself these questions. And then I just went online and just started Googling things, you know, and going on YouTube and and just I literally just researched what happens when you die. What happens? Is there a soul? You know, do they continue to live? Can you continue to speak to them after they die? And then I eventually came across this really interesting online event on YouTube, which was to do with speaking to people who have passed over. So there were a bunch of professionals who were talking about their work, their professional work that they did, which involved speaking, communicating to spirits. And you know, initially I thought, God, this is crazy. It sounded so insane to me that someone actually does that for a living, you know. And then I watched the whole thing, and it was about a 2-hour long conference, and these, you could see that these people knew what they were talking about, and they were speaking about their world of communicating to spirits as if it was something completely normal, and they were referring to these beings again like they were like they were living beings, like they were human, and you know, just a regular person like your friend or your loved one. And for me, something really, I guess it resonated within me, even though I didn't really believe in anything at this point. But I just knew I had to contact one of the people specifically. This lady really resonated with me, and I found her details, and I ended up booking a session with her, one-to-one session with her. And about a month later, I went to see her, and she got in touch with my mom. She brought my mom into the session. And of course, at this point, I went thinking, you know, this is just ridiculous. I'm not going to get anything from it. They're probably lying and all of this stuff. And then, so I went to the session, and then I was just shocked at the amount of information that the lady was able to reveal to me and to relate to me that was true, and is basically what happened without me even having told her anything much, except from, you know, the fact that my mom died. And yeah, so it was really strange for me. I still found it very hard to believe that this event is real and that someone can actually communicate with the spirit of a deceased loved one. But you know, slowly, I guess it just, my mind began to open up from that stage. That was kind of like the first time my mind opened, and I started to see, okay, there is something more to this than we're being told. And that was 6 years ago, and since then I just started exploring the topic, learning more about it, going to classes where they actually teach you how to develop your own psychic abilities, because apparently everyone has them. It's just that we don't really practice them or use them much. And now 7 years later, I've managed to practice a lot of these things myself. I wouldn't say I can communicate with the spirits yet. I think I still find it a little bit difficult to do that, but I've definitely had really powerful experiences, also with my mom. And I would say, I know that this world definitely exists, and all the research that I've done also, I work in documentary also, so I've done a lot of research into that as a documentary filmmaker. So I've done a lot of research on that topic, and from what I've seen, for me, it's very, very real. And yeah, that's all I can say. So I'm definitely on the other side of this now, 6 years later. So, yeah.
Gosh, it's actually, I was thinking as you were speaking, our stories are quite similar, aren't they? In that, you start off like questioning and everything, like, and that losing, something that really resonated with me when you said, like, losing your trust in everything. When your mum passed on or passed over, like, you were thinking everything was okay, and then suddenly, bang.
Yeah, exactly.
And that loss of trust is massive, isn't it? And in terms of grief, loss, and also how you try and readjust to life. Yeah, how old were you when your mum passed over?
I was 24, yeah, just before it was like a month before my 25th birthday. So yeah.
Gosh. So
Yeah.
what kind of impact did that have on you personally? Can you talk about initially how that was?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I think that's probably what really led me to research this in the first place. Was obviously, I mean, losing my mom, losing for anyone to lose their mom is like, the biggest, the most important figure in your life. So for me, it was kind of like just my whole world crashed, because my mom was kind of, she's the one that sort of held the family together. She was really like the pillar of the family. So it's almost like everyone's world around her crashed, because she was what was holding us together. And then it was just really weird to have that dynamic changed, and then to, the way I was with my dad changed, and then with my sister as well. Obviously our relationship, we got closer. um but yeah, it was really, really, it was like the worst thing that could have ever happened. And what made it worse, I think, was that in the, I guess, in the kind of year coming up to her death, our relationship wasn't that great. There was a lot of uh I guess on my side there was a lot of resentment, because I didn't really want to be in London. I wanted to travel, and I kind of felt a little bit held back, because obviously she was ill, and I couldn't really leave, because then I felt guilty, and I wanted to be there at the same time, but at the same time I wanted to, live my life and go travel, and and instead, my mom always kind of worried about money a lot, and about really us, needing to have savings, and so that we can, just in case anything happens. She's always been in kind of that mentality of we need to save. So I was very much like, okay, I need to have a job. And at the time I hated my job, and I didn't want to be there. And I guess I had a little bit of a depression at the time anyway. So on top of everything else that was going on, and then that really caused a lot of friction between my relationship with my mom. And there were a lot of things that I felt like I couldn't really say to her, because I felt like I don't want to make her situation worse. I don't want to make her feel even worse. But then at the same time, when you don't talk about these things, they stay with you, and they kind of cause this huge emotional blockage, and you can feel it, between in the dynamic anyway. Um, so yeah, there were definitely a lot of things that I felt like I didn't get the chance to say to her anyway, because within the space of those 3 months, everything just happened so quickly, and we were kind of just on um, alert mode, and everything was like, just trying to get everything sorted before, before she passes away. So it wasn't like in the movies, at least that's what I thought to myself. It wasn't like in the movies where you get to say bye to them, and you get to tell them everything you wanted to. And, for me, it wasn't like that. And that's what really made it so difficult for me to accept that I couldn't even, I couldn't even tell her everything I wanted to. And I couldn't, there were a lot of things that I said that I wish I took back, and that I regretted saying to her. And, like the whole mother-daughter relationship is quite, it can be quite intense sometimes. So there were a lot of regrets that I had, and a lot of things that I wish I told her. And so that really, when she passed over, that just killed me. And I was just thinking, I can't imagine myself living like this for the rest of my life. Like just the guilt and the regret were, literally, I felt like I was going to die from that myself. So that was probably the biggest thing for me. I just wanted to know that I can still speak to her, and I can still, even though she's passed away, I can still say the things that I wished I said before she passed away. So yeah, so that's why I think the first time when I went to see the lady that I had the session with, even though, still nothing had changed in terms of my mom was still dead and everything, I actually walked out of that session feeling elated, because I thought, wow, I can actually, now I know I can communicate with her, and she is here to hear me, and she can understand, why I said the things that I did, and why I didn't say the things that I didn't. So basically I could get a bit of closure that I didn't really get the chance to have when she was still here. So for me, that was a huge relief, I guess, if you can put it that way, because at least it meant I can still, yeah, basically have that closure with her that I didn't get the chance to have before. So yeah, that was the biggest thing for me. Yeah.
So did you feel like you said you talked about closure there, did you feel like after that sort of one session that, you know, I've kind of been able to say what I wanted to say?
Well,
How did it sort of carry on after that? Because there must have been some things that you were still.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, to be honest, even now I've said this, you know, it still hasn't really finished, because it's been a whole process for the last 6 years of me kind of, I guess, communicating those things little by little. You know, I still, even though it's made a huge difference, and I've had more sessions after that, and also going to classes and being able to kind of connect with her through that. So it's definitely made things a lot easier. There are a lot of things that I've been able to get off my chest and kind of almost kind of repair our relationship in a way, even like in this way. So similar to with you, but it's still a process. There are still things that I guess I'm finding difficult to understand in terms of why she did certain things, and why our relationship was so difficult in the last kind of year before she died. And I'm still making my amends with that. But there's just so many different pieces to it. You know, I feel like I've been repairing piece by piece over the last few years. It's not just like a one process where you can just wipe the slate clean and that's it. You know, I mean, I'm sure you would know as well. Yeah, it's been a huge process, and I'm still, yeah, and we're still kind of doing that. So every now and then I will kind of in my meditation I will you know, try to basically call on her, and then sometimes I will really feel her energy around me, and I'll literally sometimes feel even her words, her speaking to me. So, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's very still that logical part of me that just thinks, no, I'm making it up, you know. So I kind of balance between the two things, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I know this was real, and I know she was definitely here, but then sometimes I'm like, no, you just imagined that. So it's still a process of the whole thing. And
Yeah, there's no shortcut, is there, on this this grieving and the healing journey, especially when, you know, you've had a difficult relationship, or there's been elements of mistrust or some barriers between you. You know, well, you know my story with Christian. We had mistrust very early on when he went to a different school, and I never realized that, he never realized that, but that sort of played out through our lives. But having that opportunity, and that we always see it as like an onion or a gift that you're unwrapping, like pass the parcel kind of gift that you're unwrapping to get to the bottom of stuff as well. And it's definitely a marathon, the whole healing. So I'm interested actually about your family. How do they feel about you? We'll talk about obviously more about your healing and later on, but like from your family, your sister and your dad, and how do you talk to them about this? Do they understand? Do they?
Yeah.
How have they managed their grief compared to you, maybe?
Very different. Every one of us just dealt with it in a very different way. So I dealt with it just literally by just diving straight into the spiritual stuff, and I didn't want to know about anything else, because to me science didn't give me any help, religion didn't really give me any help. So I was like, okay, spirituality is for me, so I just dive straight into that. My dad went completely in the opposite, well, not so much opposite, but he went into Christianity. So he started going to church. He, you know, was going there regularly every Sunday, reading the Bible, kind of going with that. And we actually, at some point, we had a lot of, I'd say, almost arguments, really, because there's a big part of the Christian religion which talks about the whole spiritual stuff, and, you know, says that this is like the work of the devil, and you're not supposed to do that. So we had it was quite difficult to explain to him, and you know, sometimes we just had to kind of agree to disagree and just leave it as that. And my sister, she was kind of, I guess, in between, but not really. I mean, she's like the scientist of the home, so she was very much on the science kind of base. And, you know, she still, I told her everything that I experienced, and she listened to the recordings that I had with my sessions, on my sessions, and I could see that she was kind of starting to open up a tiny bit, but she still had a lot of questions, and she was still very skeptical about it all, and kind of like, you know, saying, oh, but then but then maybe the lady just guessed this, or maybe, this and that. She was trying to have very logical explanations as to how, she would have so much information.
Mm.
So yeah, she kind of went into that side, and she was pretty much, she really got herself really busy with her job and just kind of put her head down and started to, I guess, in a way, she almost avoided dealing with the whole grief. And my dad also, because my dad went straight back to work and just continued to work, whereas I at this point I was actually let go of my work, because they were downsizing on the company. And to be honest, for me that was good, because I didn't like working there anyway. But I basically used that time for, I guess it was the first year, to just not work, and I just stayed at home because I just couldn't. I guess I was just going through this whole dark night of the soul, and at this point I had no idea what I wanted. I knew I didn't want to go back to the old job or have anything similar to that, and I was just so confused. And I guess I just used that time to explore the spiritual field a lot more. So yeah, I guess I was probably the only one that really dealt with the grief more openly than anyone else from the home. Yeah, so that's how we all dealt with it. It's a very different.
Yeah, I think, well, everyone does, don't they? They all deal with, they have their sort of ideas of about death, life, and how they're going to cope with it, and then also how they cope with previous losses. It all compounds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's yeah, and thank you for being so honest as well. Actually, I'm hearing, like, thank you for being so honest about your family and your relationship with your mum, because I know, we're always told don't speak ill of the dead and what have you, but we all have issues, don't we, with our relationships. No relationship is perfect, and there's always a hangover somehow. Where you wish you'd been able to say things, and you obviously found your way to do that. So I'm interested where you start, obviously researching for yourself, and you obviously have found your way of the way you're comfortable with processing and the way you're moving forward. So at what point do you suddenly feel, right, I need to share this with other people? Because you have your YouTube and you have, your podcast. How does it does it sort of feel like it's part of your mission or part of a purpose? Or
a little bit. Yeah, it does feel like that, because I guess I outside of the sort of the class where I began to go to with this, that was teaching about the spirituality and everything, I couldn't find anyone else in my sort of environment, from my family and my friends, that really knew about this world. And I found it really strange, because the more I dived into it, the more I realized how normal this actually is, and how normal it is for people who have lost loved ones to actually communicate with them, and to have these experiences where they've been able to communicate with them, or they've heard their voice, or they've had some sort of a weird experience that's made them aware that, they are present and they are around them. And I just found it really strange that people don't talk about that, because obviously from my personal experience, that was it was so difficult to live a life with the idea that I'm never going to see her again, that I'm never going to be able to speak to her again. That's what made it really difficult for me. And I thought that it was just going to kill me, because it was like I couldn't imagine myself continuing to live my life with all that guilt and that regret, and just not having, kind of had that closure with her. So for me, that was really difficult. And I imagined, and I knew that a lot of people have very similar experiences. So, they, I mean, even people whose loved ones pass away in sudden accidents, or, car accidents and things like that. And I thought, God, what about these people that haven't even had the chance to say anything to their loved ones? And I just thought it was ridiculous that people are not actually open about it. And for me, it's like, why would you not, just because, I guess because of the whole stigma against it. But for me, that wasn't enough. So I guess the more I started to learn about this, and the more I realized how separated these two realities are, the more I thought I just felt drawn to start putting this out there. And I thought, because I've done, and obviously my background was in film and documentary, and I thought it only makes sense for me to actually start doing something that's related to that, and to start kind of putting this information out there for people, for more people to see. I mean, because it's already out there, but it's just not as much. It's not as common, I guess, or at least before it wasn't as common. Now I think it's becoming more and more common for people to talk about these things openly, but before it wasn't, and it was kind of like very hidden, and still a lot of stigma. And whoever you told that to, they will kind of just look at you like you were weird or crazy. And I just thought that was insane, because that's what's causing more grief and more pain to the people who have lost someone. And for me, that's just wrong for us to continue to do that, and to play that stigma, and to continue with that false pretense. So yeah, that's why I thought I'll start doing the podcast. So that's kind of how it started. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant, because once you start talking, I mean, I've just written down like brave. I've just had that brave. It was a brave thing for you to do, apart from anything. Because you're right, there is this stigma, and there is this, and I remember it very well as well. And I've probably only since been in the podcast and doing it for a while, I'm now very easy talking about it all. But at the beginning, I was like, still. But and once one person sort of says something, somebody else goes, oh yeah, okay, that kind of happened to me. And then, like you say, it becomes a normalized thing. I mean, do you think it ever could become normal that this is what we all think and experience? Because there's a big difference, isn't there, between being told something, or having a medium sort of being the gatekeeper, to actually having an experience yourself.
Yeah. I totally think that that's going to become the norm in the future. I don't know how long it will take for people to finally start getting it, but I definitely think it will become the norm one day. And I think now, even with science, so much of the science now is actually backing this up with near-death experiences, and with people who have passed away and then came back to their bodies, who died and came back to their bodies, and there's so many experiences that they've been able to report, and communicating with their loved ones who have passed away, and then coming back and kind of talking about the information they've been given. So there's so much scientific data now and information that's backing all of this up. And then on top of that, you have all the mediums, and people like yourself who are actually communicating with the spirit world and are able to relay all of this information as well. So you have both of these worlds now kind of coming together, and it's it's almost like they're starting to work together and combine, the information from one another. So I think it's really amazing what's happening. I think it's just going to take a bit more time for kind of everyone to get on board. So yeah, and probably not everyone will, but I guess there will come a point where we have like a good level of people that now accept it as a truth and as a reality, that we are much more than this physical reality. So yeah, I think you'll have a lot of benefits when that happens.
Yeah, I like the idea that I can see Christian and I are definitely doing that sort of beginning, that new sort of collaboration of, I like, now we've done our work or our healing and we've come out the other side, like now it's the time where we share it. It's like sharing story, isn't it? I know in the podcast, I mean, I don't know if you can share any particular sort of stories that you've heard that really sort of stand out as, I don't know about proof, but that really helped you understand as well about or that helped you on your journey.
Yeah, definitely. There's I mean, apart from the ones that I kind of had experienced in my classes when I used to go, where, I mean, there were just so many people who had loved ones that would come back and tell them information and stuff like that. That almost became like the norm. So it was really weird, because I felt like at one point I was living in two different realities. I had the reality of, when I'm at home and with my family and my friends, and then we'll kind of talk about regular things and just normal things. And then I had the other reality, which was going to class and speaking to all these spirits who would come back to, to tell people how sorry they are that they did what they did, or, so it was quite funny actually. At one point I started to get confused between the two, but yeah, as you asked me, yeah, there is one specific one that I remember. I spoke to a lady, and she had a near-death experience. She was hit by a van, and she her soul left her body. So she described it really visual, really detailed to me. And her soul left her body, and she basically told me how she literally just started seeing, her body first on the road, and then she was seeing all the people gather. And in the beginning, she was saying that she couldn't quite understand what's happening. She was kind of like a little bit confused and thinking, oh, why are all these people gathering? You know, what's happened? And she looked down and then she could see her own self basically lying on the floor on the road. And then she, I think she either got pulled up into like a light or something, and she was saying that her grandmother, her dead grandmother, appeared to her and started, you know, asking her how she is and what's going on, and you know, basically she had a full-on conversation like we are having right now with her dead grandmother. And I think, as far as I remember, she told her that it's not her time yet, you know, she needs to go back, she still needs to look after like the family and stuff like that. And I think the last thing that she said she remembered was just before she woke up, one of the the nurses who was next to her was trying to, you know, keep her not awake, but I guess they were trying to resuscitate her. So I think she remembered one of the nurses saying something to her, like, "Oh, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And then eventually they managed to bring her back to life. So her spirit went back into her body, and then next thing she knows, she was in the hospital, and then that's when she properly woke up, and then she remembered she had a rough idea of what's happened, but yeah, it started to come back to her. So yeah, I think that's what probably stuck with me, one of the stories that stuck with me a lot. I guess because it was just so descriptive in terms of what she saw after she left her body. And it's very similar to a lot of the stories that I've heard just from doing my own research on the topic of life after death, and people having near-death experiences and leaving their body and then coming back. So they all sound quite similar in terms of what happens and what they can see when the death happens, and then them communicating with their loved ones, maybe like a friend or a grandpa or grandma. So yeah, there's a lot of these stories, and a few of these have, yeah, definitely remember, quite interesting to, yeah, they kind of stick with you.
And is there an element of disbelief that you have when you hear these stories, or are you totally on board with it all?
Yeah, well, I think by now, because I've heard so many of them and it's just become so normal, that I don't really, I feel like I don't really have the need to question or be skeptical about it, because I know by now that it's that it's very, very real, and that's pretty much what happens based on what I've heard before. Yeah, I think the only times I do question something is when maybe I am with a medium who's trying to connect with someone, like with the spirit of a loved one, and then they're relaying the information. Then I guess I'll just kind of question myself, to what extent do I believe that they're actually communicating with that person? You know, sometimes there are those little doubts that I have, especially I've been to some sessions where there are these kind of group sessions where you have the medium and they'll just call out names, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm hearing a name that's to start with M or N," you know. Those are the ones I'm kind of a little bit skeptical about. But yeah, apart from that, I think, yeah, most of the time I do tend to just believe what they tell me, because I feel like there's not really any reason for people to lie about these things as well, I guess. Yeah, so I
think it takes a lot to stand up and talk about these things, doesn't it? So it's not you know, I would never have put myself in this position if it hadn't been totally true for me, because why would I put myself through that? I know you were talking about the you know, your dad and your conversation about the, you know, all of this is wrong and evil, and the Bible says you shouldn't. I've had all that thrown at me as well. So and you know, loads more. So you don't do these things lightly and stand up and talk about it. But you know, your YouTube channel and the podcast, so how do you decide what subjects you're going to cover, or the guests that you're going to invite, or do they just sort of come into your life like they do for me?
Yeah. Well, it's both ways really. So when I first started the podcast, I guess by then, so that was only 2 years ago now, and by then I guess I'd been doing so much of this kind of spiritual work that I had a pretty big group of people that I already know that were already involved in this work anyway. So I kind of just started interviewing a lot of them, and then as I continued to do more research, I came across loads of other different stories where the people their work sounded really interesting to me, and I would contact them and ask them to be on my show. And you know, not everyone was kind of psychic mediums. Some of them were energy healers. You know, they could work with, like, do psychic what do they call it, like psychic surgery, which I find fascinating. And other people who dealt with, like, shamanism, and other people who do numerology or tarot readings and stuff like that. So I kind of, when, you know, I expanded, although the majority of my interviews were to do with life after death and kind of communicating with psychic mediums, because that's what I found the most interesting. I definitely kind of expanded into different areas as well. So it's not strictly just kind of life after death, because that gets a bit tiring after a while. It's like, okay, now we can move on to something else.
we need another topic to discuss. Yeah, so often we teach what we need to learn ourselves. So what do you think were you sort of exploring your ideas as the YouTube channel was growing?
Yeah, pretty much. So I kind of did it the way, in terms of the things that I was interested in. So at the time, I was exploring things like quantum energy, quantum healing, astrology, numerology, and things like that. So I brought on quite a few people that work in those fields. So I had a numerologist, and I had an astrologer, and then I had a lady who works with sort of quantum healing, and how the idea that the illnesses that we develop and the diseases that we have are actually, a lot of them are related to emotional causes. So I find that really interesting, and how emotions can have such a huge effect on your physical body, and how it can make you sick and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of things that I'm basically interested in, and I wanted to explore in more depth, because again, you know, science only really goes so far, and the things that we're taught in school only teach us so much. And then religion is kind of like a whole another subject that, you know, it's kind of very narrow-minded in many ways. You know, not to dash anyone's beliefs, but I definitely believe in God. It's just, I feel like the way we have been taught in religion is a little bit limiting. So it's nice to expand and to kind of explore what else there is outside of the religion. So yeah, so it's pretty based on my own interests.
Yeah, it's interesting, because the same with my sort of journey that we've been on. I've like picked and chosen the things which resonate for me out of religions, spiritual beliefs. I mean, the whole gamut of things. I've done so much reading, and it's the same with you, I guess, being open to everything that's come up into my view. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, I'll take a bit. But I don't know about you, but I found when I would learn something, and then I would be given a book recommendation or something from a friend or from spirit sometimes, and I'd be like, I'd read a passage and go, oh, well, that was all about what's just happened to me. Did you get that going through?
Yeah, definitely. I'll get like weird things, like I guess you can call them synchronicities, and I'll be kind of looking up something online, and then the exact message that I was kind of looking for would I would just read randomly in a website somewhere, you know. Something will come up in numbers. I love kind of the whole number meanings and things like that, so I'll get a lot of those, and like repeating numbers. So I'll definitely get a lot of that. So almost like, I guess in a way, spirit or the universe was trying to give me the information for all of these different avenues, and I will end up finding them either through again, like researching something online, or maybe having a conversation with someone and then mentioning something really random, and then it kind of resonated with what I was thinking about previously. So yeah, little things like that I'll find they will just come across, and then I would kind of get hooked on that thought, and then I'll explore it further and try to learn more about that. So yeah, it's really interesting how that works.
And do you feel, I mean, we talk about this, I'm sort of being the finder of lost things and myself, but do you think or maybe the question is, how is your grief journey and exploring grief how has that changed you as a person? You know, have you found things that you didn't know about yourself? Have you uncovered gifts? Have you, you know, how has it sort of changed you through the process?
Yeah. Oh boy, massively. Like it's changed me so much. Yeah, I'd say the whole process of obviously dealing with the grief and learning more about the spiritual side and what happens in life after death. Um, I guess they're all kind of interlinked, because when you learn, what I found is when you learn about life after death, it automatically teaches you more about life and about yourself. Uh, and specifically, I'd say, for example, in some of the classes that I used to go to, a lot of the spirits that we were kind of communicating with and that were really coming through, and they would be mostly ancestors, you know, that were kind of wanting to come in and say hi, or come in and apologize about something, or relay their grief about something. And all of that kind of really taught me about what's really important in life, and what because a lot of the people, a lot of the spirits who did come back and, you know, wanted to say something, it was normally about wanting to say sorry or apologize for something, or, you know, talking about a regret that they had, that maybe they didn't deal with a certain situation in the correct way when they were still alive, or they didn't pay enough attention to their kids when they were still alive, or they regret doing something. It's normally these two sort of things, is the regrets and the guilt that you always would come up in every situation. And that really, and for me, that really taught me about, okay, you know, what's really important. And for me, I think it's about, you know, having that honesty and being able to say sorry when you can, and just basically clearing the air with the person when you can, and when you still have the ability to. And really thinking about the important things in life, such as you know, having more love, having more connection with people, not caring so much about who owns what property and who has so much money and this much money. And yeah, it's really things like that, I think, that really kind of stood out to me and really made me think about where I'm putting my energy in my own life. And maybe, you know, maybe I should focus more on having more authentic connections with people and friendships, rather than getting really too involved with my work and not having enough time for my family and for my friends. Because, you know, at the end of the day, these are the things that are really important and that make your experience so much more richer than you just working away, but not really having a connection with anyone, not really having an authentic connection. And I think that's what really stood out to me. The people, the spirits that we were kind of communicating with, and the ones that were too busy or too angry or had some sort of an issue, normally they're the ones that really had very painful emotions to work through. And they're the ones that kind of couldn't really quite move on, you know, into like the higher realms, and move on into spirit properly, because they had so many of these really heavy feelings that were pulling them down and making them almost like stuck, you know, in this kind of limbo state. So that was really interesting for me, because that I never knew about, that this even existed, and that this could even happen for a spirit to become stuck and to not be able to move on. So that was really interesting, learning about that whole side of life, and, well, life after death, and kind of seeing what what is it that makes people not able to move on, basically. So that taught me a lot about what I need to do in my life in order not to get stuck when I do pass on one day. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? That two, this whole thing about the two realms, you know, the physical and the spiritual, like we're all experiencing the same things. We take what we have and we take it over.
Yeah.
And that heaviness and that stuckness, you know, Christian had that, obviously. And we've been able to, and actually our journey is the same with you. It's like you heal and you journey on both sides of the realms. You do it together. Like that's how we've been able to heal and transform both of our lives. We've both done it together, Christian and I. And I guess with you and your mum, how have you come to some sort of understanding, or is there's obviously more still to go, but do you feel she's freer now?
Yeah, I definitely feel this way. I think compared to the very first few times when I had sessions with my psychic medium, to the later sessions, there was definitely a shift. It wasn't a big shift, but there was definitely a shift in terms of, I think at that point my mom felt a lot better. That now we've realized that she isn't completely gone, and that we can still kind of communicate with her when we need to, and that and I knew that she's still kind of around us and kind of looking after us in a way. But it definitely felt more, I guess, a little bit more distant, as in she knew that we're going to be okay, and she knew that we'll be able to take care of ourselves. And so I felt like, from her point of view, there wasn't such a need for her to be constantly here and present with us all the time. She knew that now we know that she's there and that we can communicate with her whenever we need to. But it's like I guess she kind of, well, from what I last remember, she was traveling back and forth to see her mom, because her mom's still alive, my grandma, and she was kind of traveling to us and then going to see like other family and things like that. So it sounds like she was having a good time traveling between different places. But yeah, I definitely feel like now, and also because I don't really dream about her as much as I used to. I used to dream quite a lot about her before, and the dreams were quite heavy. And I think that was probably partially me processing my own grief and my own kind of issues that we had at the time before she passed away. And now I don't really have those dreams anymore. So I feel like we've managed to clear a lot of that. Not 100%, but a lot of it, I feel like it has been cleared. And so I feel like as a result, maybe on her side, she's also maybe been able to move on a little bit as well with her own path of where she's meant to go after this. So yeah, it definitely feels like it's not completely, I don't feel like she's completely gone, but definitely more distance than before, than the very beginning. So yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? I feel with Christian as well. He was really close when I kind of needed him at the certain points where we needed to do work as well. And then he would go off and visit friends, or he's working with children actually in spirit. So he has his roles to do, but I was also very aware that he was off like sowing the seeds for what's coming now. Do you feel your mum is I was going to say, do you feel she's a sort of a guide, a supporter? How do you sort of feel about your relationship now?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think, yeah, I definitely feel like she's there to like guide us, especially in like the difficult moments and stuff. And I feel like now, I guess because I've been able to do all of this work with her through the last several years, I feel almost like in a way our relationship is better in a way, because I feel like now I can talk to her about the things that I felt like I couldn't before. And that because, you know, there were all of these things and that we just felt like we couldn't talk about in the house. And now, obviously, now that we've kind of gone past this stage and we've opened up to so many things, and I've been able to see how, you know, her own childhood and the things that she experienced as a child really kind of influenced the way she was in certain ways, like for example with like the money and always wanting to save and just being so caught up with work and wanting to constantly work because there was just this fear of not having enough, which was, you know, programmed into her since when she was a child. And now I feel like I can understand her a lot better, and I can see why she was the way that she was in certain respects. And not that it was in a negative way, but it's just I guess when she was alive, there were a lot of things that I just couldn't understand why she did certain things the way that she did, and now I can understand that. And now I feel like when I do try to connect with her, I know where she's coming from, and I know, you know, our relationship feels closer than it was before in a way. Obviously not in the same way in the physical manner, but in the way that her energy feels around me. And yeah, in terms of how open I feel like I can be with her. And also the fact that I think they can pretty much hear your thoughts anyway, so I'm kind of like, okay, there's no point in me trying to hide anything because she'll be able to know anyway. So yeah.
That's brilliant. I remember Dad saying, our dad saying, when I sort of told him about Christian, he doesn't really believe anything that Christian and I are up to. He just can't mentally cope with it. But I remember him saying, like really questioningly, what like is Christian around you all the time? like, will you hear him all the time? And I sort of thought, well, at the moment I will, but I don't think I will. I think it will lessen in time. But to try and put your head around what we're talking about, you know, for people who are maybe, I'm not sure about this. Yeah, it's a difficult leap, isn't it? But as you say, once you're in it, and it was interesting to hear you were talking about being in that group and you're actually feeling like you're on two different sort of planets almost, because this is so normal. Exactly. To us all, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think I became so used to talking about the spiritual stuff that when I was talking about anything else, it sounded so foreign to me and so just petty. And, you know, people talking about their, like, the bills that they have to pay and like complaining about like issues with, I don't know, the weather and things like that. And I was like, so many times I'll go off in my own little world and I'll start thinking about all these things in like the spirit world and things like that. And I'm like, oh, come back to the, you know, the conversation. So yeah, it
certainly gives you a different perspective on life as well, doesn't it? And I love that you and your mum have that, like, more understanding and probably some forgiveness and, you know, compassion maybe between you, which I know with Christian and our relationship massively I wouldn't say improved, but we got to know each other really well, and we have got to know each other really well. So I think for anyone who's maybe missing a loved one, and you know, that there is, you know, our stories sort of show that with some faith and some openness and some receiving, you know, anything can happen, and the connections can be really improved. You know, we've got to go. This is our time. It always happens so quickly, Desi. It really does go so quickly. But I just want to thank you so much. And you know, as I said earlier on, you were the first person that I opened up to, and I so appreciate that. I so do. And you know, Christian does as well. He's making me feel a bit, you know, because it was the first time we used our voices and was able to share our truth with people, and I thank you for that hugely, and thank you so much for coming on. If people want to see your more of your films, they should go to I presume the Bridging the Realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just Bridging the Realm on YouTube, and yeah, you'd be able to find the channel. So everything's on there.
Yeah, and actually in November 2020, I was part of a life after death online summit that you produced and obviously created. So there's so much in that. It was a couple of days, wasn't it? And there was so much good stuff in there. So anybody who's interested, please go and have a look at Desi's YouTube channel and the podcast. And thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, lots of love. Thank you very much. Next, oh, that's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Next week, I'm not sure who's going to be on the podcast or what's going to happen. So could be a potluck. We'll see what happens. Anyway, lots of love. Thank you very much, and see you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to The Finder of Lost Things. I think we've been triggered so long and so hard by COVID, and it's going to carry on. People are getting used to stillness, and they're getting used to more solitude. But how do you use that time for the highest good? This process that we're going to explore will bring back the joy and purpose to life. That wholeness, you know, that sort of harmony and flow and togetherness. People are really ready to find their lost parts now. You can find me at hannahvelton.online.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.